Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. Ben Folds performs live at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. next Monday, November 15th at 8 p.m. He joined me to discuss his radio hit Brick, his animated film work in Over the Hedge, and his role as the National Symphony Orchestra's first ever artistic advisor. Hey, Ben, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, good to be here. How's it going?
It's going great. So obviously this Kennedy Center show is called In Actual Person Live for Real Tour. It's a funny name, but it's also, it's been a crazy 18 months. And, a lot of us can relate to that. Oh my gosh, an actual person live for real.
Yeah.
How'd you spend the pandemic and how excited are you, to get back out?
Well, I'm on the lucky side of the pandemic. My son did get COVID and he was pretty sick for a while and he got well. I was in Australia for most of the time. I had been on tour over there. It derailed a lot of stuff, like it did for everybody. But I found that I learned a lot. I learned to slow a couple things down, and actually probably my sense of well-being was increased in some way during that time, just for slowing down and not doing so much stuff. Now at the end of it, what I'm finding is that I'm trying to cram in all the stuff that I didn't do over the last 18 months. And so I've learned nothing in essence, because now I'm really back to the treadmill. But I'm really it makes me so happy to see audiences and it's just sort of reconnect with people. That sounds cliche, but when you look out and you see this audience of people who have some of them have really been through it, they're the happiest ones there. We're real for real in actual person show. And so that's actually, every time I step on stage on this tour and see the people in the audience, it's really great, because this whole time has been spent crazy online. It makes people nuts, and it's cool to see this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's no substitute for that audience to perform or actual live in person interaction. So, what sort of stuff, if we come out to the Kennedy Center on the 15th, what sort of stuff are we going to hear? Is it sort of like a Ben Folds greatest hits? You trying out anything new, or what are we going to hear?
At some point I've got a lot of stuff I've been writing, and at some point I may just start to drop those things live, play them, but so far the way it's gone is people have been out of the venues now for so long that there's something about just playing whatever I feel like, and it's from any era. I would call it greatest hits, just what seems like the moment. You know what I mean? Right. I feel like if you're playing all the time and you're throwing in new stuff, it's not stepping on the experience of other stuff. I don't know if that makes sense, but what I'm finding is I'm going to play this one tonight. It's new. And then I go, but that's going to be cutting into someone's other favorite song. And I just feel it. I just start launching into something else, but what I would say is that the Kennedy Center is super special place for me, because I've spent so much time there now with the National Symphony Orchestra as the artistic advisor, playing stuff with the orchestra or putting together shows. It's like backstage is like another home for me now, and playing an actual show of where I'm just a musician playing my songs is kind of energizes this show in a way I can't explain. It's like inviting people in. It's like Daryl's house or something. I'm really super excited about it.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you mentioned that, you've been serving as the NSO's, I think it's their first ever time they've had an artistic advisor since about 2017, I think. How big of an honor has that been? And I know you've done a lot of what's it called? Declassified Ben Folds Present series with a bunch of crossover with pop artists and stuff that played with the symphony. But just how rewarding has that whole experience been?
Oh man, it's huge. One, because I I just love the people I work with down there. I mean, they're lifelong, really interesting. Um, uh, they've spent their life in this. You know what I mean? So it's like uh, their resources on stuff I need to know, want to know, people I would want to bring in and work with. I mean, it's the Kennedy Center, right? But it's very, it's not, they're not who you would think they are. I mean, they're very, it's pretty crazy. It's pretty eclectic. And That's been the biggest thing, is that I have this resource to learn anything. I mean, I have access to the library and scores of anything I want to see, handwritten from any era. That's amazing. And actually being able to bring what I know, because I've been playing with orchestras, solidly playing my music with orchestras around the world for 15 years now, and I've learned humbly a lot about how it's done and how it's not done. And to get to then bring my homies in who also play pop music, but not often with an orchestra, I can save them 15 years. I could go on about about this forever, but we're actually making a whole lot of progress towards how this is done. When you say crossover, this is also cultural. Bringing an R&B artist or a country artist into the Kennedy Center to play with the National Symphony Orchestra is not just a matter of mashing it up. It's actually getting them to collaborate and understand each other's language. Uh, it's I think it's profound, and in an era where our tribes are just going to their corners and taking off the gloves and spitting each other's faces. It's a rough time. So any fault line is a big deal. Like, oh, this person's okay. That's right. We got a country guy. He must be a Republican. Okay. The concert master, she must be a Democrat. Or we're going to hate each other. It really feels that way in this era if you don't address it really quickly musically, which is the way that we get back together.
Yeah, perfectly said. I mean, it's like, and a lot of those, like you said, you might think it's a country star Republican, and it turns out they're not actually a Democrat, or vice versa. You never really
And
know until you get out there and you have that conversation.
it does not matter. The musicality of someone who studied in a university, studied in conservatory, is just the same in a way as a country artist or a rap artist. It's just that people go to a corner and make quick assumptions. And in this environment, we've added this political layer, which does not need to be there. And at the Kennedy Center, which is a government institution, I can feel that can happen quickly, but that's the place that you want more than ever to be completely, not just nonpartisan, but non-religious, non upbringing, non-ethnic, non-everything. You are a musician, and then when they step out on stage, the audience is an audience. They're people. We take that crap out of it. And interestingly, and I'm sorry to go on about this, but like what has interested me the most about curating these shows and putting this stuff together is just along the way, keeping the human beings there and keeping the musicianship and the humanity first. And then suddenly everything takes care of itself, because we've had some weird ones on there, and it just feels awesome if you just make music. And that's what you can do at the Kennedy Center. And one of the reasons why I'm so reverent for the place, and I will be on my absolute A sort of whatever, I don't want to call it A game, but I'm just going to be myself and be very happy about it at that show.
Oh yeah, and real quick, can you rattle off some of the names of the people that you've brought in for that declassified series? It's some really heavy hitters.
Yeah. Like, we were just talking about country, Jamie Johnson. And he's like, he speaks a particular language of music, and he related to a couple of members of the band, but not as many as some. Sarah Bareilles, she's it's kind of a West Coast middle class Broadway mentality in her pop thing. That's kind of where she comes from. She doesn't read music, but she's absolutely brilliant, and we brought her in. And then we've had gosh, who else? Regina Spektor, her father was a violinist for the Moscow Symphony Orchestra back when it was the USSR. And so she had great reverence for a late Rostropovich, who was, a big presence, bring Shostakovich into the symphony. So that kind of meant something on its own. Right now, I can't. I mean, John Batiste came in. He's a Juilliard trained, conservatory trained musician, probably the most literate of all the musicians I've brought in the pop world. But because he's kind of a jazzer, he's kind of loosey goosey, and hey, what's happening? He doesn't seem like it. But their relationships to the orchestra are all, I think, really special. And I love being there for all of them.
Oh yeah. Well, we just dished on a bunch of other artists, but let's find out a little more about yourself while we have you. I know you're born in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. How'd you get into music in the first place? Like I believe I've read about, your dad brought home a piano and just remind our listeners, how you got into it.
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, the influences for me really, when I was a kid, it was pretty much all R&B. Those were the records I was hearing. But when I was a kid and growing up in North Carolina, there's this really good public school system, and there was there were really good teachers in it, and it was a lot of arts in my upbringing in Winston-Salem. I mean, just it was everywhere. So I had great access to it. I had access to play percussion in a youth symphony, the Winston-Salem School of the Arts Youth Symphony, when I was like 9 or 10 years old, and that was real big too. So for me, it was all about having just like this great support system, and having access to all those things, which is another reason for my involvement with the Kennedy Center is I see fewer and fewer kids of what was my income bracket getting access to that. If you got dough, you got access. But in this era, we want kids to have the access to it young. So yeah, I had that. Very lucky.
That's for sure, for sure. Well, I know, speaking of education and music and stuff, I know you went to University of Miami briefly and then left for UNC Greensboro, and you sort of came up that way. But remind us how you formed the Ben Folds Five to begin with.
Yeah, well, it was I've been playing with 3-piece piano, bass, drums bands for almost the decade of my 20s. I lived in Nashville some of that time. Some of that time I'd lived in North Carolina, and actually I spent some time in New York as well. And so I've been playing with all these musicians in that configuration. I felt like there was something there. And right when essentially when grunge, indie rock went massively mainstream, I realized that one of the things I'd been toying with, which was distorted bass, which seems like a small thing, but it's like a piano trio with like this fuzz grungy element up underneath it. And I was like, that's what makes me the happiest. And that's like working right now, like just add distortion to it. So when I met Robert Sledge, bass player, I realized this guy's like the best bass player in the world at that. So it was just really, really lucky. And then we met the drummer Darren. All this happened real quick. Grunge got big. I moved back to North Carolina from New York. I met these guys super fast. We all had sort of the same vision of, there's no piano bands out there. Let's let Robert and Darren just rock like it's 1994, and I'll just play Broadway crap over the top of it. And yeah, that should work. and it did. It was a sound I hadn't heard before.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. I know that self-titled debut album was in 95, and then the second one, the follow-up, 97, Whatever and Ever Amen, was really massive, including that hit song Brick. I'm sure you've been asked about that a million times, but my listeners will kill me if we don't at least get one question on Brick. We know what it's about, but just remind maybe some of our younger listeners that song deals with some powerful stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a reality that that teenagers get pregnant. And this is this is the first person account of what happened to me and my girlfriend, and the perspective is just mine, like it's just like two people going through something. It's mine. I never intended to be a woe is me sort of thing at all. I never really wanted to talk about it at the time. It was my girlfriend that went through it, and she was awesome, and she was years later awesome about the song. And in an era where people can misunderstand stuff really quickly and just get up in arms about it. I like a conversation about stuff, but I'm not really saying anything in the song except it happened. This is the way it felt to the male involved in this. And I have people tell me, shut up. My perspective as a male doesn't count in this because I'm not the one that went through it. And I don't say I went through it in the song. I said this was my perspective. My girlfriend went through it. I was pacing around a parking lot, worried about what was happening, because of course they don't let you in. Mm-hmm. And it's sad. And in the song, I'm not saying politically whether this should be allowed or it shouldn't be allowed. It's just that it actually happens. It actually is sad, and it involves two people. So I never heard anyone written a song from that perspective before. I don't think it would be allowed now. And I think when people discover what it's about and they just listen to 2 bars of it, I catch a lot of grief for it. But like maybe if the grief was like it could have been clearer or better written, yeah, I'll accept that. I mean, I was 27 when I wrote the song, and I might have gotten a few things wrong, and there might be a line or two in there that's like, oh, that may be a little less sensitive than it could be. But the song is one of the most real things that the band ever did, for sure, because we all knew it was about, we all felt it, and did it really as honestly as we could. It was recorded live in a bedroom with an upright piano and about 6 mics, and it became a really big hit. I never spoke about it at the time, I don't care to nuance it any more than that. But that's what it's about. It's about teenage pregnancy, and it's something you wouldn't wish on anybody at any age. But teenagers, we're not, you're not equipped to deal with it all. It's pretty rough, and it happens all the time. And they're in the crossfire of it politically as well, and that's also unfortunate.
Right, but you're not taking a political stance in that. You're just describing an experience of something really hard to go through, like death
Yeah.
or anything else, and you're just describing it. It's a human experience in that song.
Yeah, it's a human experience, and I hope it has loads of empathy for young people who go through it. If the song does something well, I would want someone to go, wow, what a rough thing for a kid to go through. Geez, God, I'm sorry that happened. That's what I would want more than anything. And I have a political opinion on it, but I'm pretty sure it ain't in the song, and I don't think it belongs in the song because it's an experience. It's a human experience and not a political one. And I'm allowed to say my political stance. I just don't think it helps the song.
For sure, for sure. Well, after Ben Folds 5 obviously is very famous at that point, but tell me about breaking off solo. How rewarding or freeing was it to do Rockin' the Suburbs? Well, I guess that came out on 9/11. You can't plan that timing. But that super sunny Speed Graphic, and then of course Way to Normal after that. But just reflect on the solo work really fast. Was that refreshing, freeing?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was, you spin. Interestingly, my kids were born roughly the time that I went into my solo period. And, what you learn about the second twin that's born, the first one's born, comes out really straight because there's not any space to mess up. The second twin, spins because the second child has never experienced space, never experienced choices and room to stretch out and spin around, always comes out crazy because it's spinning. I feel like that was my solo career. I feel like all of a sudden I could do anything I wanted to, and I did a lot of spinning, which I'm glad for because I have all these things to show for it. You mentioned a couple of releases. I was working so fast and furiously when I went solo. I was EPs, 3 EPs, uh, solo live album, orchestra period started then. A band called the Bends. I produced a bunch of records. I wrote and produced a William Shatner record. Built a studio from the ground up. All this in about 3 years. And I was just going, spinning. Some of it didn't work, some of it did. And I think that's what artists should be able to do. If you can, you should just just go a little bit beyond your capacity and go. So I'm really proud of my solo career stuff too. And like there's so much of my solo career that's discovered, by different age groups. So the younger people come out, it's not like they don't know Brick, but they don't really care about it that much. Like I have this odd growth of an audience that came from a movie that I made the music for. I mean, like I would have.
What movie
never
are you
guessed
talking
that.
about? Was it an animated movie?
Well, it's called Over the Hedge, and it was an animated movie, and I think it should have been kind of an important one. It's got really important. It was DreamWorks, and I wrote all the songs for it, and now I get so many audience members that know those songs that started their Folds journey then. And that's crazy to me because I consider it obscure, even though it was DreamWorks movie that was widely released. It was a huge release, but it was an animated movie that came out the same week as Cars, and that pretty much sealed its fate, but not for me. I mean, like the songs from that are songs that an audience knows. So the oldies come out and they're like, oh yeah, he hasn't done anything since Brick. The young people come out and they're like, I grew up with Over the Hedge, and that's the thing that they know. Others come for the for all different phases. When you've done a career this long, you realize it hits a lot of different kinds of people who don't know about the other parts of it.
Oh, I believe it. We had Rufus Wainwright on a couple weeks ago, and he was saying he has a whole young audience that just knows him from Shrek. So yeah, right. It's funny how that works. All right, cool. Well, you've been more than generous with your time. There's so much else we could talk about with your NBC Sing Off, and then your memoir, A Dream About Lightning Bugs. Everybody check all that out, but we'll let you run. You've been generous with your time.
Well, yeah. All right. Well, it's really good to talk to you, and I was especially excited to talk about this one because the Kennedy Center, I'm going to be like a little kid. That I'm going to be kind of on fire about that one. So I'm excited to actually promote for once. This is awesome.
Cool. Again, it's Ben Folds at the Kennedy Center Monday, November 15th for the quote in actual person live for real tour. Let's get back to live music. Hey, thanks, Ben.
Right on. Thanks, man. See you.
Thanks so much for joining us on Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time. I wanted to take a second to tell you about an app I really enjoy. Living in the DC area is great, and Podcast DC gathers all of the local shows that I like all in one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast DC is the new local app with hundreds of DC area podcasts to choose from. I can earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts I love instantly. Available in the App Store or in Google Play, listen local with Podcast DC.